Good afternoon, class. I hope everyone's having a happy 4th of July. This week we're looking at dissertations and topics that might interest us, and I've been doing a lot of research lately for other classes that have been on the Civil War, and political history really hits a spot with me since I teach AP government, and I really found Abraham Lincoln to be an interesting topic. And since COVID was being spread around so much, I had to kind of choose a topic that I knew I could find enough primary sources because I could not get to an actual archive. So what I did was I looked at Abraham Lincoln's use of emergency powers. Of course, we know the situation that surrounded the Civil War. It was a crisis that no other president had ever faced. And Lincoln had to do some things that may have been unconstitutional, yet the Constitution was vague on it, and Lincoln took these measures like suspending habeas corpus, increasing the size of the military, spending money before Congress had appropriated it. He took these measures to help get to the end game that he knew was trying to preserve the Union. I found two dissertations that I found interesting. They were a little different, and each one was a little different. One was by Cindy Bowman, and it talked about, and it's titled Abraham Lincoln's Transformational Leadership. It was a very interesting one. It was not written in Turabian style. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was written in either APA or MLA. So the methodology, it was somewhat similar into the fact that it was qualitative analysis, but it did not have the Turabian background that we're used to as historians. The other one that I looked at was Trial by Fire, Abraham Lincoln and the Law. This was written by Robert Johnson in 2007. This one, the methodology there was it was of course qualitative analysis, but it utilized, it looked at the legal background and political backgrounds of Lincoln, used a lot of cases and different primary sources to help prove how Lincoln would transform from a lawyer to a politician / president eventually. The sources used by both authors of the dissertation, Bowman utilized a lot of primary and secondary sources. However, some of the sources were more on just leadership styles, whether it be educational leadership or business leadership. It did not really focus on historical matters. However, she did use some historical secondary sources like Kern's Team of Rivals and stuff to help analyze Lincoln as a leader. What she really focused on was Bennis and Nannis's modern transformational leadership theory, and tried to use Lincoln to fit into that theory, using his examples as president throughout his time in office, to see if he was an effective leader. Johnson took a different approach, of course. He, of course, used a lot of the primary and secondary sources that I had mentioned a little bit earlier with cases and stuff. And, of course, had a heavy emphasis on the legal aspects of Lincoln's career. And he tried to, utilize this to help prove his thesis. Some of the examples of his primary sources, of course, would be Basler's Collected Works of Lincoln. He also had the OR and different, the Abraham Lincoln papers, of course. So he had a lot of what was needed primary source-wise. He also has some good secondary sources. Farber's Lincoln's Constitution is a good one, of course. He also had Kern's Team of Rivals. He also had Frank J. Williams, some of his works. And, of course, Frank J. Williams is an Abraham Lincoln scholar. So he knows a good bit about Lincoln, and especially in the mindset of the legal aspects of Lincoln's decisions constitutionally. With the content, Bowman in Transformational Leadership, of course, tried to use the 4 characteristics, and that's kind of how she based her paper or her dissertation, she used those 4 characteristics: vision, social architect, trust, and self-deployment, to analyze Lincoln's leadership qualities. And she did this pretty much chapter by chapter, just took each characteristic and used that. Johnson kind of looked at the legal career and philosophy of Lincoln and how he was able to transform from a lawyer to a president. And the conclusions that came from both of these dissertations, Bowman, of course, found that Lincoln did fit the transformational leadership theory, and which was not a shock for me, as I have done some research on Lincoln, and he does fit a lot of those different characteristics. He was a good leader. He did help get our nation through a time period that looked like it could have just fallen apart. Johnson's conclusion was based upon that the law shaped the manner in which Lincoln handled issues throughout his life. Lincoln definitely was a man of the law, and Lincoln, as Johnson came to conclude, Lincoln tried to look at the overall outcome of each decision he made, whether it be as a lawyer or as a president. He tried to look at these decisions and how it impacted life, which was unique. It kind of showed that Lincoln he was definitely human, and he realized people's needs, and he tried to make decisions that would help people, not hurt them. Many of the examples of that would be when Lincoln would pardon some deserters. You know, he didn't pardon them all, but he did pardon some because he looked at the circumstances. And near the end of the war, he realized there was a lot of bloodshed already. So looking at these 2 dissertations, got to see how they were formed. There was some good analysis there, and definitely a lot of hard work put in to these dissertations. Hope everyone has a wonderful day.